Ever have trouble with your pie pastry? Hi everyone, welcome to Black Cat Kitchen. I hope you're doing well. Today is Masterclass episode number 2. We'll be making short crust or pie pastry. This pastry is really easy to come together, but a lot of people make really simple mistakes. So I'm going to show you the surefire way to make sure you get that lovely, flaky, tender pastry. Let's get started. See the description below for a list of ingredients. Tip number 1, very cold butter. I like to freeze my butter overnight and then leave it in the fridge for 1 hour before I'm about to make my pastry. Tip number 2, grate your butter. There's nothing harder than trying to incorporate really cold butter into flour. So my trick is to grate it with a cheese grater. You can do this in the food processor, but I find it stays frozen longer if you do it by hand. It's important to use unsalted butter because it has less water content. We want to make sure we're controlling the moisture. Here we're using 875 grams of plain flour. You can also use pastry flour. And I'm adding 2 teaspoons of fine salt. If you like a sweet pie crust, you can also add in 2 teaspoons of granulated sugar. But I quite like my sweetness to come from the filling. Add your flour to your butter and make sure you're using a really big bowl. This makes a lot of pie crust. And a lot of people will use 2 knives here or a pastry cutter, but I find the best tools in the kitchen are your hands. So just get in there and start rubbing that butter into the flour. Just so that that flour starts to get coated all over that butter and you're breaking it down just slightly. You still want some pieces of butter in here that will give a really nice, lovely texture and flavor in your final product. So this is what we're looking for. When you squeeze it, it holds together like a bit of a wet sand, but you can still see some of those bits of butter. Tip number 3, ice cold water. Put a few ice cubes in your water and only use as much water as needed to bring the dough together. So we're going to start with 2 tablespoons. And we'll add more as needed. You can already tell that's going to need just a little bit more, but you can see it's already coming together really nicely. Remember, less is more here. Tip number 4, don't overwork your dough. I promise you it will come together. And I think that needs just a tiny bit more. That's looking really great. And you can still see those little flakes of butter. Now I like to dump my dough onto my work surface and just help to pat it together, making sure we don't need any more moisture here. So just bring it together with your hands and you can see it's really coming together nicely. Don't worry if you've got some of these crumbly bits, they'll start to come together as well. Tip number 5. Cut your dough once it's come together and give it a stack. Press it down and it creates those beautiful flaky layers. So I'm going to cut these into 4 segments. And again, don't worry if there are some crumbly bits coming off the end. I'll show you how to sort those out in a second. And I'm going to move 3 of them and I'm going to wrap them in cling film. And I like to help future me out a little bit here. So I just sort of form it into a circle, pat it down a little, and pop it into the middle of my cling film. And then if you've got any little stragglers that have sort of fallen off, you can use the cling film to help bring it all together. So I like to really press it down in there, and that helps all of the butter to sort of combine and bring all that flour together. So you can see that's looking like a really nice smooth dough. Tip number 6, make sure to chill your dough after it's come together to relax those glutens. I'll do this with the rest and they'll go into the fridge for at least 30 minutes. This recipe will make 2 large deep dish double crusted pies. It will also make 3 smaller double crusted pies or 6 single crusted pies. You may not end up using all of this pastry at once, and that's okay. It's a large batch so that we can freeze some. It freezes double wrapped in cling film for up to 3 months. And the final tip, take it out the night before you want to bake, pop it in the fridge, and let it come up just slightly to room temperature before you're ready to roll.
There's something about him that makes a girl want to take him in her arms and...
Now that our dough is cool but not cold, and you can see it's got a little bit of pliability there. We're going to unwrap it and roll it out. So we want to generously flour our work surface. We don't want our pie crust sticking. And then I like to put a little bit more flour on top of the dough. I also happen to run some down my rolling pin just to make sure nothing sticks. And then we'll just start by rolling away from us. And gently twist and roll away. Always rolling away to keep the pressure even. And I like to twist my dough as I'm working with it so I know it's not sticking. And you can go ahead and pick up some of that remaining flour that's on your surface. We've got a little sticking here, so add a little bit more flour. And while I'm here, before that gets too thin, I'm just gonna press that back together. If you find it keeps cracking, just overlap it slightly and press down. It will come together, and once we've got it in the pan, we can give it a little bit of extra support as well. To make sure your dough has been rolled enough, just fit your pie plate on top of your dough and make sure you've got a nice little bit of overhang there. That will be crimped in for the crust. And now to get it into our pie plate. I like to very carefully just roll the pastry gently over my rolling pin. Don't want to lose any bits there. And then put your pie plate underneath and then just gently unroll. You don't want to push the pastry into the tin at this point. You want to gently lift the edges and help it into the pie plate. We spent a long time getting those glutens all resting in there, and we don't want them to get stretched again. And we're just going to bring those little cracks back together. And if you've got any really big ones, you can sort of just patch them up with any little excess bits of pastry. If you're struggling to get it into the corners of your pan, or if you have a fluted pan, you can take a little bit of extra pastry and just press it down into the pan, and so that it doesn't stick to your fingers. And there is our finished bottom pie crust. I've trimmed off any excess overhang with a pair of kitchen shears, and now I'll pop it back in the fridge for 30 minutes. If you're making a double crusted pie, just roll out your second pie dough, and once you've got your filling in your pie crust, top it off on the top and crimp your edges, and you're ready to bake. But as a bonus, I'm going to show you how to make a beautiful lattice top. For a lattice crust, I want to roll this out as much as I possibly can, nice and thin. And I'm going to bring all of those craggy edges in as I'm rolling this, because I want to avoid as many cracks as possible in our top. And if you find it sticking, just try and toss a little bit of flour underneath the dough. That way you can easily spin it around. And again, just pinch any of those little cracks together and keep rolling. Now I'm just going to square off our edges so we have nice clean lines. And we're just going to cut these bits into strips. I quite like when they're not perfectly even. It just makes it look a little bit more rustic. But if you like them to be perfect, go on and grab yourself a ruler, and you want to get as many as possible as you can out of this roll. I've drawn a circle approximately the same size of my pie crust. You don't need to do this. You can literally build this right on top of your pie. I'm just doing it here so I can show you how easy it is to put one of these together. So we're always going to start with our middle two pieces. Start by laying your first piece across the center and then gently placing the other piece in a cross shape. Now we'll go for another piece. And I like to start by doing one whole side and then alternating and getting the other pieces in there. I find that's the easiest. And now time for our next one. So we'll slide it under. If you're doing this on your pie, you'll gently pull that piece back, pop that one into place, and just set that back down again. If I have any pieces like this that look like they might break, I'll use those for the ends because they're a little bit shorter. Now onto the other side. So I'll gently pick up the one side, grab my pastry, and down it goes. Simple as. So whichever side has a top on it is the one that you're going to peel back first. So we've got 3 that we're peeling back here. 1, 2, 3. And then we'll get another piece of pastry and lay it across the pie this way. Now we'll place those back. And then we'll pick up the other pieces and we'll tuck another piece right in there. And that is how simple it is to do a lattice. So just continue on the other side until your lattice is finished. Some open-top pies need par baking on their crusts. What you'll want to do is dock the bottom of your crust with a fork, lightly brush it with some egg white, crimp your edges, and fill it with some parchment paper and some pie weights. If you haven't got pie weights, dry rice or beans works perfectly. You're going to bake this at 170 degrees Celsius or 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 25 minutes before adding your filling. If you need to fully bake your pie crust, say you're filling it with a custard, you'll want to bake it all the way through, so you're looking at about 35 to 40 minutes. So bake it for that 25 minutes with that parchment in there, and then pull the parchment paper with your pie weights or beans out of the middle of the pie and allow the rest of your pie to brown up. Let it cool and you're ready to fill. Stay tuned to see how we use this pastry in our 2-crusted blackberry pie. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and tell us what your favorite pie is. See you next time.